when it comes to UI or UX related job advertisements, it's so difficult to read them and understand what these people are really expecting from you. Sometimes you go through the interviews, you get the job, and then only you realize that, oh shit, all I have to do is just UI work or graphic designing or PowerPoint, or sometimes it's only the UI implementation work. Why this is happening? Because everything is called UI UX these days. Now, when the HR team gets the requirement from the engineering team, what they do is they either copy an existing advert or they use AI tools like ChatGPT to generate the advert content and they publish it. So this content may or may not reflect their actual need. Unfortunately, there are no universally agreed definitions or guidelines for these different job titles. So how could you solve this problem? How do you understand whether this is a real user experience designing job or is just a UI job or graphic designing? I'll tell you a way. We can't change how these different companies, put up their advertisements. We have no control whatsoever over their processes and everything. But if we get to know this entire bigger picture, then we can read them and we can understand them. And when we go to the interviews, we can ask certain questions to make sure whether it's a real UX job so that you can solve the problem. To do that, I have to explain you a bit of these processes of user experience and how user interface connects together in this business. Now, if you look at any software product, it has three main characteristics. A software product has to be functional, a software product has to be usable, and a software product has to serve its intended purpose. Now, if you look at this picture, this is where most of the work happens in software product implementation. This is where the engineering happens. This is where most of us are involved in. But unfortunately, how does this requirement is designed? In traditional ways, we expect the client to give us this requirement. That is, if you look at these old methods of software product building, a BA goes and have a discussion with the client and get this requirement and write it down and create a document called SRS, which nobody reads, and that is how it's happened. But unfortunately, we have to understand that the client does not know this requirement fully. He has a very good understanding about what he's trying to do and what he's expecting, but when it comes to these different arrays of requirements, he does not know them. So this is where the user experience designing work happens. We have to work very closely with the client to convert this initial requirement, the initial problem statements and initial goals, into a full-fledged product. How we are going to do that will depend on the type of the project and the type of the assignment. So that is where all these processes and activities would come in, and I can't explain all these things in one video because it's not that simple as you could think it is. So anyhow, this is where if you look at, if you have ever heard of these terminology like, the user research, user journeys, and, all these things comes into play in this particular section where we try to design a product from this initial requirement based on the user needs, user goals, user pain points, as well as the high-level business requirements, and all these things comes into play here. So if you look at this particular section, this is where the most of the user experience is being designed. At any point, user experience could go wrong. Everybody has to contribute to deliver this user experience. It's not one man's goal, but that's all right. But if you look at these different activities, this is what I call the tier 1 user experience designing part. Then we need to design certain, decide on certain quality attributes like, the security, the performance, the usability. And out of these, there are like dozens of quality attributes. And out of all these things, usability comes into the responsibility of a user experience designer. Others mainly go to the developers. So they will decide upon what level that we need to keep these quality attributes. And one could wish that we need to keep everything high, but the quality comes with a cost. So we need to decide which is the required level of these things. But for us to do that, we need to, design this high level, the product design. Now, when you look at this high level product design, that is where the user journeys are designed, and oftentimes the user interface is the visual representation of these user journeys. That is how people interact with your user journeys, and that is where the user interface design part, connects with this user experience things. So in a user interface, you have two main characteristics. One is information architecture, the other is interaction design. Information architecture will define what information, rather how the information is being organized, and interaction design is how people interact with this information. So we start this interface designing part with creating some wireframes for us to have the basic skeleton. Then only comes the visual designing part, the aesthetics and everything. For us to test whether our product design works, we need to do some testing. So if you are doing some testing with end users, real end users, we need to have something which looks real. Oftentimes, the Figma prototypes would work, but sometimes if you need to do certain advanced testing, then we need to create a functional prototype which is much beyond the Figma's capabilities. There you need to incorporate certain JavaScript to mimic the functionality. However, if you look at this three different components that I point out here: the initial problem solving part, which I call the tier 1 UX design, and the visual designing part, and the UI implementation part, the front end part. Now, if we try to create certain job roles out of this one, this is how it's going to happen. The general expectation of the software industry, when they say user experience designer, they expect from you to solve this problem, handle this tier 1 UX design part, as well as create a nice looking interface. Rather, design nice looking interface. So this is the general expectation when it comes to UX designer. If your job title contains engineering part, that means you have to do this part as well. You have to engineer this designed interface, and at least create HTML, CSS, and JavaScript depending on the tech stack that you are using. So this is called the user experience engineer's job role. Now, if you look at the typical UI designer role, it is all about this one. You oftentimes given the wireframe or given the design brief, what needs to go in this interface, the person who gives you this requirement may or may not have created a user journey. So if it's a person who knows user experience designing, then they will create a nice looking, rather nicely working user journey, and will ask your help to convert it to an interface. But that's not the case in many companies. They will just say that we need this, we need that, and you have to provide interfaces unlimitedly. So when they see the interface, they say, no, this is not what we're expecting. So you ask for changes. So it's an endless cycle of work, and hectic cycle of work. So this is where the user interface designer role comes in. When the industry refers to UI UX, I'd say 9 out of 10 times they refer to this particular UI role, because if a company follows user experience processes and activities, if the company knows these things, they will never call this position UI UX. They will call this user experience design. But unfortunately, even some companies who are not following UX processes also call this thing UX designing. That's where the problem comes in. But this is how the role definition should go. If it is a UI UX engineer, then engineering activities should also come into play. If you have this basic understanding, when you are reading through the job advert, you could see if they have mentioned these related activities in the job description. For example, if they have mentioned like you have to work closely with the product owners or the clients, and defining these requirements, and designing user journeys and everything, yes, it sounds like a true user experience job. But if they have mentioned something like you have to work very closely with the BAs, doubtful. I'm not saying it's not a proper UX job, but oftentimes then in these companies, the BAs would dictate this process, and they will design the product functionality. So all you have to do is to play that tier 2 role, the UI designing role in these companies. I'm not saying in every company it's the situation, but in most of the companies that's how it's been done. So if you are still confused, having read this job advert, then in the interview you can ask these questions. Now, they will give you some time for you to ask questions. In any interview, they will give some time to ask certain questions. So without asking what my salary could be or what days I have to work, whether it's, you could ask those questions as well. But more often, I would recommend you to ask questions related to their working processes. How does the process happens in this company? And you could ask for an example. And if they explain this entire picture as I explained to you, then that means it's a proper UX job. And if they say that somebody will give you the requirement, all you have to do is to design the user interface and create a user experience, well, I would say that is a user interface designing job. So that is how you could understand whether this job particularly serves the user experience role or rather the user interface designing role. I hope you get some knowledge out of this video, and if you do, just let me know. And if you have any questions, leave a comment. Thank you.